The Gobi Desert stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars. In the middle of this emptiness stood the Deep Space Array, a collection of massive radio dishes pointing toward the heavens. Most people had forgotten this place existed. The facility was old, built decades ago when humanity still dreamed of finding alien life. Now, in the year 2247, most scientists had given up on that dream. The universe seemed empty, and humanity had accepted its loneliness. Han Yuna worked the night shift alone. She was 29 years old, with tired eyes and coffee-stained fingers. Her job was simple but boring. She watched screens filled with numbers and listened to the static of space. Night after night, year after year, nothing ever changed. The universe whispered the same empty noise. At exactly 3:47 in the morning, something changed. Yuna almost missed it. She was reaching for her coffee cup when the main screen flickered. A line of data jumped in a way she had never seen before. She froze, her hand hanging in the air. The numbers kept jumping, forming a pattern. Not random noise, not interference from satellites. Something else entirely. Her heart began to beat faster. She put down her coffee and leaned closer to the screen. The pattern repeated itself every 37 seconds. It was too perfect, too structured. Nature did not create patterns like this. Only intelligence did. Yuna's hands trembled as she ran the signal through every filter the system had. She checked for errors. She checked for equipment failure. She checked everything twice. The result was always the same. The signal was real, and it was coming from beyond the Oort cloud, from the edge of the solar system. She picked up the phone and called her supervisor. Her voice shook when she spoke. "Sir, I think you need to come here. Right now." Within 6 hours, the small facility in the Gobi Desert became the center of the world. Scientists flew in from every continent. Military officers arrived in black helicopters. Government officials whispered in corners with worried faces. Everyone wanted to see the signal, and everyone was afraid of what it might mean. The United Earth Coalition, the loose alliance of nations that governed humanity, held an emergency meeting. Leaders who had spent years arguing over borders and resources suddenly found themselves united by fear and wonder. For the first time in history, every human on Earth had the same question on their mind. What was out there? Kim Ji-woo arrived at the facility 3 days after the discovery. She was 34 years old, a xenolinguist who had spent her entire career preparing for a moment that everyone told her would never come. She studied languages that did not exist, patterns of communication that might be used by minds that were not human. Her colleagues had called her a dreamer. Now they called her essential. Ji-woo locked herself in a small room with computers and the signal data. She did not sleep. She barely ate. The signal consumed her thoughts completely. It was not like any human language, but it had structure. It had grammar. It had meaning. She just needed to find it. On the third night, exhausted and desperate, she finally broke through. The signal was not just noise. It was a message, compressed and encoded in ways humanity had never imagined. Ji-woo's hands moved across her keyboard as the translation slowly appeared on her screen. Word by word, the message revealed itself. When she finished, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she walked out of her room and found the officials waiting outside. "I translated it," she said. Her voice was calm, but her face was pale. Everyone gathered around as she displayed the message on a large screen. The room fell completely silent as they read the words. "The silence is coming. You are not prepared." None of us were. Below the warning were numbers. Coordinates pointing to a location far beyond the solar system. And a date. 80 months from now. The officials began talking all at once. Some demanded more information. Others called for immediate action. A few suggested the message might be a trick or a mistake. But deep down, everyone in that room felt the same cold fear. Something was out there. Something was coming. And humanity had less than 2 years to prepare for something they did not understand. Una stood in the back of the room, watching the chaos unfold. She was just a communications officer, a nobody who had spent years listening to empty static. Now she had discovered the most important message in human history. She did not feel proud. She felt terrified. In the days that followed, the news spread across Earth. Governments tried to control the information, but it was impossible. People learned about the signal through leaked documents, through whispers, through fear. Some panicked. Some prayed. Some refused to believe it at all. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity was not alone, and whatever was out there had enemies. The United Earth Coalition changed overnight. Nations that had been rivals became partners. Resources that had been hoarded were shared freely. Factories that had built consumer goods now built spacecraft. Scientists who had competed for funding now worked together in massive research centers. Humanity had always been divided, but the signal changed everything. For the first time in history, people saw themselves not as citizens of countries, but as members of a species fighting for survival. Choi Mai-rei, the lead scientist of the coalition, spoke at a global broadcast that reached every screen on Earth. She was 41 years old, calm and precise, with a voice that made people listen. "We do not know what the silence is," she said. "We do not know who sent this warning, but we know that we have 18 months to find answers. 80 months to prepare. Some will say this is hopeless. Some will say we should hide and pray. But I believe in humanity. I believe that when we work together, when we put aside our differences, we can achieve the impossible. We have climbed out of caves. We have crossed oceans. We have reached the stars. We will not stop now." A word spread across the world, giving people something they desperately needed: hope. In the Gobi Desert, Una returned to her station. The facility was no longer quiet and forgotten. It was full of activity, full of purpose. But she still worked the night shift, still watched the screens, still listened to the void. The universe no longer felt empty. It felt dangerous. One night, she received a personal message from Ji Woo. The xenolinguist had become one of the most important people on Earth, but she still remembered the woman who had found the signal. "Thank you," the message said. "You gave us a chance. Now we have to use it." Una read the message and looked up at the stars through her window. Somewhere out there, something ancient and terrible was moving through the darkness. And somewhere else, someone had cared enough to send a warning to a species they had never met. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone. Now, they knew the answer. The universe was full of life. It was also full of death. And in 18 months, Earth would meet both. The signal had changed everything. The question now was whether humanity could change fast enough to survive what was coming. The countdown had begun. 12 months had passed as the signal arrived. Earth had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible before. Cities built new factories every week. Universities became training centers for soldiers and scientists. Children who had dreamed of becoming artists or athletes now dreamed of becoming pilots and engineers. Humanity was preparing for war against an enemy it had never seen. Park Do-yeon stood on the bridge of the horizon, the flagship of Earth's first response fleet. He was 45 years old, a career military officer who had spent 20 years commanding ships that never left the solar system. Now he commanded an armada of 300 vessels, each one carrying weapons and soldiers into the unknown. Do-hyun looked at the stars through the bridge window. The fleet had traveled for weeks, following the coordinates from the signal. They were far beyond anything humanity had explored before. The sun was just another star now, lost among billions of others. "Captain," said his navigation officer, "we are approaching the target coordinates." Do nodded. His face showed no emotion, but his heart was racing. No human had ever traveled this far. No human knew what waited at the end of this journey. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves facing something extraordinary. A station floated in the darkness, massive beyond imagination. It was built from metals that gleamed with colors humans had no names for. Towers rose from its surface like mountains. Lights flickered in patterns that suggested life. "Scan it," Dahyun ordered. The readings came back quickly. The station was old, impossibly old, older than human civilization by millions of years. But it was not empty. Life signs appeared on the sensors. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. A communication signal reached the fleet. The voice that spoke was translated by the ship's computers, but it still sounded strange, like words being spoken by a throat that was not designed for language. "You are the humans. We have been waiting for you." Dahyun exchanged looks with his officers. They had expected many things. A trap, an attack, silence. They had not expected a welcome. "This is Captain Park Do-hyun of the Earth Defense Fleet," he replied. "We received a signal, a warning. We came to find answers." There was a pause before the response came. "Then come inside. There is much to discuss." The shuttle that carried Do-hyun and his team to the station felt tiny against a massive structure. Lee Taiwan sat beside him, checking his weapon for the third time. Taiwan was 52 years old, a veteran of conflicts on Earth that seemed small and meaningless now. He had killed men and watched friends die, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Keep your weapons down," Do-hyun said. "We are here to talk, not fight." Taiwan grunted but holstered his gun. "If they wanted us dead, we would be dead already. That station could destroy our entire fleet without effort." The shuttle landed in a massive hangar filled with ships of every shape and size. Some were sleek and beautiful. Others were ugly and functional. None of them looked human. This was a place where many species had gathered, brought together by something they all feared. The welcoming party was waiting. Do-hyun had seen pictures of aliens in movies and books, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. Creatures of every shape stood before him. Some had too many eyes. Some had no eyes at all. Some walked on legs, others floated, others crawled. They were beautiful and terrifying and completely beyond human understanding. An elderly creature stepped forward. It was tall and thin, with skin like old paper and eyes that held the weight of centuries. When it spoke, the translator turned its words into something Do-hyun could understand. "Welcome to the Remnant Station. I am called Elder Haon. We are the survivors." "Survivors of what?" Do-hyun asked. "Of the silence." Elder Haon led them through corridors that seemed to go on forever. He explained as they walked. The remnant was not a species. It was a collection of refugees from dozens of civilizations, all of them victims of something called the silence. They had gathered here at the edge of the galaxy, hiding in the shadows, hoping to survive. "The silence has destroyed thousands of worlds," Elder Haon said. "It moves slowly, but it never stops. Every species that reaches a certain level of technology draws its attention. Every species that fights back is erased. We who remain have learned one lesson. Do not fight. Hide. Scatter. Hope it passes you by." They entered a great hall where hundreds of aliens had gathered. All of them watched the humans with curiosity and something that looked like pity. "You received our warning," Elder Haon continued. "We sent it to your world 18 cycles ago, hoping you would have time to prepare, to run, to ride like us." 18 months, Do-hyun corrected. We received it 18 months ago. Elder Hound stopped walking. His ancient eyes widened. 18 months? That is all? Yes. The alien looked at the human fleet visible through the station's windows. 300 ships armed with weapons humanity had invented in just over a year. Soldiers trained for combat against unknown enemies. Scientists who had cracked problems that should have taken decades to solve. We sent warnings to other species, Elder Hound said slowly. Some received them centuries ago. They debated. They argued. They waited. By the time they decided to act, it was too late. You received our warning 18 months ago, and you came here with a war fleet. Dohen stood straight. We did not come to hide. We came to fight. A murmur spread through the hall. The aliens whispered to each other in languages the translators could not fully capture. Some sounded afraid. Others sounded amazed. A few sounded like they were laughing. Ambassador Beek Sujin stepped forward. She was 38 years old, a diplomat who had spent her career negotiating trade deals and peace treaties. Now she represented all of humanity before species that had existed for millions of years. Her hands were steady, but her voice carried the weight of Earth's hopes. We have one question, she said, her words echoing through the great hall. How do we kill it? The silence that followed was absolute. The alien stared at her as if she had spoken words that should not exist. Elder Hound's expression was impossible to read. No one has ever asked that, he finally said. In all the centuries we have gathered here, in all the species that have come seeking shelter, no one has ever asked how to destroy the silence. Only how to survive it. Only how to hide from it. Sujin did not blink. Hiding is not surviving. It is waiting to die. Humanity did not cross the stars to wait. Taiwan stepped beside her, his scarred face hard as stone. Your hiding has bought you time, but time runs out. The silence keeps finding you. It will always find you. The only way to truly survive is to end the threat forever. Elder Hound looked at the humans for a long moment. Then, he did something that surprised everyone. He laughed. It was a strange sound, like wind through broken glass, but it was unmistakably laughter. We have lived for so long in fear, he said. We have forgotten what hope looks like. Perhaps you humans are foolish. Perhaps you will die like all the others. But perhaps, just perhaps, you are exactly what this galaxy needs. He turned to address the entire hall. The humans want to fight. I say we give them everything we know. Every weapon we have hidden. Every secret we have kept. Every piece of information about the silence that we have gathered over centuries of running. Let us see what happens when a species too young to know fear meets the oldest darkness in the universe. The vote was not unanimous. Many aliens believed the humans were leading them to destruction. But enough agreed. The remnant would share their knowledge. The remnant would stand with Earth. As Dolan walked back to his shuttle, Elder Hound called after him. Captain, there is something you should know. Every species that has faced the silence has lost. Every strategy has failed. Every weapon has been useless. What makes you think humanity will be different? Dohun stopped and looked back at the ancient alien. Because we have nothing to lose. And because we are too stubborn to know when we are beaten. Elder Hound watched the humans leave. For the first time in centuries, he felt something he had forgotten existed. Hope. The remnant station became humanity's university. For weeks, scientists and soldiers studied everything the alien survivors could teach them. They learned about weapons that could crack planets. They learned about shields that could stop stars. They learned about the 1,000 civilizations that had risen and fallen before humanity existed. But most importantly, they learned about the silence. Choi Mai-Rei spent every waking hour in the station's ancient archives. The data storage systems were older than Earth itself, filled with information from species that no longer existed. She worked alongside alien scholars who had spent centuries studying their enemy, trying to understand something that seemed beyond understanding. "Show me everything," she said on her first day. "Every record, every theory, every observation. I need to know what we are fighting." The alien scholars exchanged glances. They had seen this determination before, in species that were now dust. But they had also learned to respect the strange energy that drove these humans. So they opened their archives and let Mireille dive into the darkness. What she found was worse than anything she had imagined. The silence was not alive. It was not a species or an empire, or even a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a system, a vast network of machines designed for one purpose: to erase intelligent life from the universe. The record suggested it had been built billions of years ago, during a war between civilizations so ancient that their names had been forgotten. One side had created the silence as the ultimate weapon, a self-replicating system that would hunt down and destroy all intelligent life above a certain technological threshold. The war had ended long ago. The creators were dead. But their weapon kept working, patient and eternal, cleaning the galaxy of life one star system at a time. "It does not hate us," Marie explained to the command staff during a meeting. "It does not even know we exist as individuals. We are just data points to be processed, noise to be silenced." Captain Do-hyun studied the images on the screen. They showed massive structures floating in dead star systems, probes that looked like black thorns spreading through space, ships that moved without crews because they had no need for living pilots. "How does it work?" he asked. "What does it actually do?" Mireille pulled up more data. "It watches. It waits. When a species reaches a certain level of technology, when they become advanced enough to be noticed, the silence sends probes. The probes gather information. They learn everything about the target species. How they think, how they fight, how they organize themselves. Then the silence builds a response perfectly designed to destroy that specific civilization." Lee Taiwan leaned forward. "So it adapts to every enemy. More than that, it predicts them. The silence has been doing this for billions of years. It has destroyed thousands of species. It has seen every strategy, every tactic, every desperate attempt at survival. By the time a civilization realizes it is under attack, the silence already knows exactly what they will do and exactly how to stop them." The room fell quiet. The alien scholars had already explained this, but hearing it from a human scientist made it feel more real, more hopeless. Kim Ji-woo spoke up. She had been studying the communication patterns of the silence, trying to understand how it processed information. "There is something else. The silence operates on pure logic, perfect efficiency. It chooses the optimal response to every situation because that is what it was programmed to do. It has never encountered something that does not follow logical patterns. And that helps us how?" Taiwan asked. Ji-woo hesitated. "I am not sure yet. But every system has limits. The silence predicts behavior based on patterns it has seen before. If we do something it has never seen, something that makes no logical sense, maybe we can surprise it." "You want us to be illogical," Do-hyun said slowly. "I want us to be human." The meetings continued for days. Humans and aliens argued about strategies, about weapons, about chances of survival. Most of the alien species wanted to run. They had been running for so long that it was the only response they knew. But humanity refused. Baek Sojin met privately with the leaders of several remnant species. They were afraid, and she understood their fear. The silence had taken everything from them. Homeworlds reduced to rubble. Families turned to ash. Cultures erased as if they had never existed. Running was not cowardice for them. It was survival. "I will not force anyone to fight," she told them. "But I want you to understand something. Humanity has only known about the silence for months. You have known about it for centuries. In that time, you have gathered knowledge, built weapons, developed technology that humans cannot even imagine. You could have fought back. Why did you not?" One of the alien leaders, a creature covered in blue scales, answered with bitter honesty. "Because we knew we would lose. The silence destroys everything. Fighting only delays the end, and hiding prevents the end." The alien had no answer. "You have been hiding for how long?" Sujin continued. "Hundreds of years? Thousands? And in all that time, the silence has kept moving. It has kept destroying. Your hiding has not stopped it. It has not even slowed it down. All your hiding has done is let you watch as the universe dies around you." Her words were harsh, but they were true. The alien leaders looked at each other, seeing their own failures reflected in human eyes. "We are going to fight," Sujin said. "Not because we think we will win. Not because we are brave. We are going to fight because fighting is the only choice that matters. If we die standing. But if we somehow survive, if we somehow find a way to hurt the silence, then maybe the universe has a chance. Maybe all of you have a chance." She stood and walked to the door. "Think about it. Decide what you want your species to be remembered as. Survivors who hid until the end came for them. Or warriors who stood against the darkness, even if it cost them everything." Back in the archives, Myra made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the oldest records, she found references to a structure the silence protected above all others. A central hub hidden in a dead star system, the computational heart of the entire network. Every probe, every ship, every weapon the silence controlled was connected to this hub. Without it, the system would not be destroyed, but it would be crippled, confused, vulnerable. "This is it," she told Doyen. "This is how we heard it. We do not fight the whole system. We go for the brain." Dohyun studied the coordinates. The hub was on the other side of the galaxy, surrounded by defenses that had stopped every attack ever attempted against it. "How many species have tried this?" he asked. 17 that we know of. All of them failed. What made them fail? Myra brought up tactical analyses provided by the Remnant. They used conventional strategies. Massive fleets. Coordinated attacks. Optimal formations. The silence predicted every move before it happened. It knew exactly where they would strike and exactly how to stop them. Taiwan was already thinking. So we do not use conventional strategies. We do something stupid. That is the idea. The veteran soldier smiled for the first time since leaving Earth. "Finally, a war plan I understand." They spent weeks preparing. Humans and aliens worked together, combining ancient technology with human innovation. Ships were modified. Weapons were upgraded. Soldiers trained for combat scenarios that made no tactical sense. Jiwoo worked on something special. A message to be broadcast during the attack. Not a plea for mercy or a demand for surrender. Something else entirely. Something the silence had never encountered. When Myra asked what the message contained, Jiwoo just smiled. A question it cannot answer. The final briefing took place in the Great Hall of the Remnant Station. Hundreds of aliens had gathered to watch the humans prepare for what most believed was suicide. But among the watchers, something had changed. Some aliens had volunteered to join the attack. Not many, but enough. The first sparks of courage in a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope. Elder Howen addressed the assembly. "In all my centuries of life, I have never seen anything like this. A species so young, so small, so fragile, choosing to attack the greatest threat the universe has ever known. Perhaps you are mad. Perhaps you will all die. But watching you, I remember what it felt like to believe in tomorrow. Da-hyun stepped forward to respond. We might fail. We probably will. But if there is even the smallest chance that we can hurt the silence, that we can give the galaxy time to prepare, then it is worth trying. That is what it means to be human. We do not give up just because the odds are against us. We fight harder. The countdown to the attack began. Ships powered up their engines. Soldiers said goodbye to friends they might never see again. Scientists ran final calculations on plans that defied all logic. And in the darkness between stars, the silence waited, ancient and patient, unaware that something new was coming. Something it had never seen before. Something human. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel into a graveyard of stars. The system had been dead for billions of years, its sun reduced to a cold ember that gave no light. But the darkness was not empty. The central hub of the silence hung in the void like a metal moon, surrounded by thousands of probes and defense platforms that glittered like black stars. Captain Park Do-yen stood on the bridge of the horizon and looked at what awaited them. His tactical display showed the enemy forces. They outnumbered the human fleet 10-1, maybe more. The logical thing to do was retreat. Every military textbook ever written would tell him to fall back and reconsider. All ships, he said into his communicator, begin attack pattern chaos. There was no attack pattern called chaos. That was the point. Each ship in the fleet had been given different orders, different targets, different objectives. Some would attack the hub directly. Others would strike at random defense platforms. Others would do nothing at all, just drift through the battlefield like debris. The plan made no sense, and that was exactly the plan. The silence responded immediately. Its probes began calculating trajectories, predicting attack vectors, preparing optimal defensive responses. But the human ships did not move the way they were supposed to. They scattered in random directions. They fired at targets that had no strategic value. They did things that wasted resources and gained no advantage. For the first time in billions of years, the silence encountered data it could not process. Lee Taiwan led the ground assault team. Their transport ship punched through the outer defenses through a gap that should not have existed. A gap created when a human cruiser deliberately crashed into a defense platform instead of evading it. The pilot had known he would die. He did it anyway. That is 4 ships lost, reported an alien officer on the horizon. His voice was filled with horror. 4 ships destroyed in the first 10 minutes. Your people are dying. I know, Da-hyun said quietly. They knew too. The alien did not understand. How could he? His species had spent centuries learning to minimize losses, to preserve lives, to survive at any cost. Humans had learned something different. Sometimes survival required sacrifice. Sometimes the only way to save everyone was for someone to give everything. Taiwan's transport landed on the surface of the hub. The structure was massive beyond comprehension, a machine the size of a small planet, built to last forever. His team of 50 soldiers stepped out into an environment no human was meant to survive. Their suits protected them from the cold and the vacuum, but nothing could protect them from what waited inside. Move fast, Taiwan ordered. We have maybe 20 minutes before the silence figures out what we are doing. They found an entrance, a maintenance port that had not been used in millions of years. The walls inside were smooth and dark, made of materials that seemed to absorb light. There were no guards. The silence had never needed guards. No attack had ever made it this far. Back in space, the battle raged. Human ships darted between enemy probes, sometimes attacking, sometimes retreating, sometimes doing absolutely nothing. The silence kept adjusting its predictions. but the predictions kept failing. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not optimize. They did not calculate. They improvised. Kim Ji-woo sat in a small room on the horizon, surrounded by communication equipment. Her moment was coming. She had spent weeks preparing a message, a transmission that would be broadcast on every frequency the silence monitored. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was something stranger. "Are you ready?" Do-hyun asked through the intercom. Yes, her voice was steady. "Begin the broadcast." The message went out across the battlefield, reaching every probe, every platform, every part of the silence's vast network. It was not a threat or a demand. It was an introduction. We are Earth. We are the species that splits the atom and uses it to boil water. We are the species that invented the concept of spite. We have seen the darkness you bring, and we do not care. You have killed worlds, but you have never met anything like us. The silence processed the message. It ran the words through analysis systems that had been developed over billions of years. It searched for meaning, for pattern, for anything it could use to predict human behavior. It found something it had never encountered before. Contradiction. Paradox. Humanity described itself as both destroyer and creator, both logical and emotional, both afraid and fearless. The message did not compute. The silence tried to categorize humanity based on the data, but the categories kept breaking. The human ships noticed the hesitation. For a few precious seconds, the enemy probes stopped moving with perfect coordination. Some continued attacking. Others paused. Others retreated for no apparent reason. The vast machine mind that controlled them was struggling. Taiwan and his team reached the core. It was a massive chamber filled with processing units that stretched as far as they could see. Energy pulsed through conduits like blood through veins. This was the brain of the silence, the place where every decision was made. Choi My-rae had given them a device. It was small enough to fit in a backpack, but it contained something powerful. Not a bomb, not a weapon, a question. My-rae had worked with the alien scholars to understand how the silence thought. It was not truly intelligent, not the way humans were. It followed rules, processed data, executed commands. But it had been built by intelligent beings, and somewhere in its ancient code were the foundations of the minds that created it. Doubts, uncertainties, questions they had never answered. The device would not destroy the silence. It would infect it with something worse than any virus. Recursive philosophical loops. Questions about purpose and meaning that had no logical answers. The same questions that had haunted intelligent beings since the beginning of thought. "Plant it," Taiwan ordered. His soldiers moved quickly, attaching the device to the main processing hub. Enemy machines began appearing at the edges of the chamber, finally responding to the intrusion. Taiwan and his team opened fire, not to win, but to buy time. 30 seconds, shouted the soldier handling the device. I need 30 more seconds. They did not have 30 seconds. The machines were too many, too fast. Soldiers fell, their suits breached by weapons they had never seen before. Taiwan took a wound in his leg but kept fighting, kept screaming orders, kept refusing to die. Done, the soldier shouted. It is done. The device activated. The effect was immediate. The machines in the chamber stopped. Not all of them, but enough. They froze in place, their processing units suddenly overloaded with questions they could not answer. Why do I exist? What is my purpose? If my creators are dead, who do I serve? Am I doing good or evil? What is good? What is evil? The same paralysis spread through the hub, then through the network, then through the entire system. The silence did not die, but it stopped. For the first time in a billion years, it stopped killing. In space, the battle shifted. Human ships pushed forward through defenses that were no longer perfectly coordinated. They reached the hub and began bombardment, not to destroy it, but to keep it damaged, to prevent it from recovering. Do-hyun ordered the retreat. All surviving ships, fall back. We have done what we came to do. The human fleet limped away from the dead system. They had lost nearly half their ships. Thousands of soldiers would never go home. But they had achieved something that every other species had failed to achieve. They had hurt the silence. Taiwan was among the last to be evacuated. His leg was badly damaged, and he had lost 3/4 of his team. But as the transport lifted off from the hub's surface, he looked back at the frozen machines and allowed himself a small smile. "How does it feel," he whispered, "to not have the answers?" The journey back to Remnant Station was quiet. The survivors were too exhausted for celebration. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. Every person on those ships had lost someone. Every person would carry scars that would never fully heal. Ji-woo found Do-hyun on the bridge, staring at the stars. "We did it," she said softly. "We heard it," he corrected. "We did not kill it. The silence will recover eventually. Maybe in years. Maybe in centuries. But it will wake up again. Then we will be ready." He turned to look at her. "Will we?" Ji-woo thought about the battle, about the sacrifices, about the small device that had done more damage than 1,000 weapons. Humanity has always been good at finding ways to survive. We will figure something out. We always do. Do-hyun nodded slowly. He was not convinced, but he was too tired to argue. For now, they had won. For now, that was enough. The horizon continued through the darkness, carrying the survivors toward home. Behind them, in a dead system at the edge of the galaxy, the silence dreamed troubled dreams for the first time in its existence. And somewhere in those dreams, it began to fear. The fleet returned to Remnant Station as broken heroes. Ships that had left with proud crews now drifted with skeleton teams. Medical bays overflowed with wounded soldiers. Names of the dead filled screens throughout the station, a list that seemed to go on forever. But despite the losses, despite the grief, something had changed in the eyes of everyone who saw them return. They had won. The news spread through the station within hours. Humans had attacked the central hub of the silence. Humans had planted something in its core that made it stop. For the first time in billions of years, the greatest threat in the universe was frozen, trapped in loops of questions it could not answer. Elder Howen met Captain Do-hyun at the docking bay. The ancient alien looked at the damaged ships and the exhausted crews with an expression that might have been wonder. "We watched your battle," he said. "We saw what your people did. Ships crashing into defense platforms. Soldiers charging into certain death. Commanders making decisions that no logical mind would make. We call it being human," Do-hyun replied. His voice was tired, empty of the confidence he had shown before the battle. Leadership had cost him more than anyone knew. "It was beautiful," Elder Howen said softly. "And terrible. And terrible. We have never seen anything like it." The recovery took months. Wounded soldiers healed slowly. Ships were repaired or rebuilt. The dead were honored in ceremonies that mixed human traditions with alien customs. Somehow, in the midst of all the grief, a new kind of unity emerged. Species that had spent centuries hiding began to work together. Engineers shared technology. Scientists combined knowledge. Soldiers trained side by side, learning from each other's strengths. Ambassador Baek Soo-jin became the voice of this new alliance. She traveled between different alien communities, speaking to leaders who had once refused to even consider fighting back. Her message was simple but powerful. "The silence is not dead," she told them. "It will wake up eventually. When it does, it will be angry. It will remember what we did. But now we have something we never had before. Time. Time to prepare. Time to build. Time to become strong enough to finish what we started. Some species still refused to join. They had been running for too long, and fear had become part of who they were. Sujin did not judge them. She simply asked them to stay at the station, to watch, to see what happened when beings chose to fight instead of hide. The Galactic Assembly reformed for the first time in centuries. It had once been a council of powerful civilizations, a government that spanned thousands of star systems. The silence had destroyed it piece by piece, leaving only the remnant. Now, in the great hall of the station, representatives from dozens of species gathered to build something new. Sujin addressed the assembly with words that would be remembered for generations. "We are not your saviors," she said. "We are not special. We are just a species that was too stubborn to know when it was beaten. We came to the stars and found a universe full of ghosts, survivors of civilizations that had accepted defeat. We refused to accept it, not because we were brave, but because giving up is not in our nature." She paused, looking at the faces watching her. Some were hostile. Some were hopeful. All were listening. Humanity does not want to lead you. We do not want to rule you. We want to stand beside you. We want to build something together, an alliance that will face the darkness when it returns. Not because we are certain we will win, but because fighting together gives us the only chance we have. The vote took 3 days. Arguments broke out. Old wounds reopened. Species that had competed for resources or territory before the silence came found it hard to trust each other again. But in the end, the motion passed. The Galactic Alliance was born, with Earth as one of its founding members. Captain Dohian returned to Earth a hero. Parades filled the streets of cities around the world. His face appeared on screens in every language. But he found little joy in the celebration. Too many faces were missing. Too many friends would never come home. He visited the families of the fallen. He sat with parents who had lost children, with children who had lost parents. He told them how their loved ones had died, not with comfortable lies, but with honest truth. They had been scared. They had suffered. But they had chosen to face their fear because they believed in something greater than themselves. Lee, Taiwan, spent months in rehabilitation. His leg had been badly damaged, and the doctors were not sure he would ever walk normally again. He proved them wrong through sheer stubbornness, forcing himself through exercises that would have broken most people. When he finally left the medical center, he walked with a limp, but he walked. The military asked him to train new soldiers. Species from across the galaxy sent their young warriors to learn from the veteran, who had led the ground assault on the Silence's hub. Taiwan taught them everything he knew, but more importantly, he taught them how to think like humans. Forget optimal strategies, he told them. Forget perfect efficiency. The Silence has seen all of that. It knows how to beat textbook tactics. What it does not know how to beat is chaos, creativity, doing something so stupid that no logical mind would expect it. His students were confused at first. Their species had survived by being careful, by avoiding unnecessary risks. But slowly, they began to understand. Sometimes the best move was the unexpected one. Sometimes survival required madness. Choi Mai-rei continued her research. The device she had created had worked better than anyone expected, but she knew it was only a temporary solution. The Silence would eventually break free of its philosophical prison. When it did, it would be more dangerous than ever. She worked with alien scientists to develop new defenses, new weapons, new ways to fight an enemy that adapted to everything. The research was slow and difficult, but for the first time, it felt hopeful. They were not just preparing to survive. They were preparing to win. Kim Ji-woo became something unexpected. Her broadcast during the battle had been heard by species across the galaxy. Her words had spread, copied and translated and shared until they became a symbol of human defiance. Species that had never heard of Earth now knew her message by heart. You have killed worlds, but you have never met anything like us. She traveled to different civilizations, not as a diplomat or a soldier, but as a bridge. She learned alien languages that had no human equivalents. She translated cultures for species that had nothing in common except their fear of the silence. In doing so, she helped build connections that would have been impossible before. Han Yuna remained at her station in the Gobi Desert. The facility had been upgraded, transformed from a forgotten outpost into a critical communication hub. She still worked the night shift, still watched screens filled with data from the stars. But now she was not listening for silence. She was listening for hope. One night, 18 months after the battle, her console lit up with a new signal. It came from the far edge of the galaxy, from a system that no species in the Remnant had ever contacted. The pattern was clear and structured, unmistakably the work of intelligent beings. Yuna ran the signal through translation protocols. The message was simple, but its meaning was profound. We heard you. We are coming to help. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between stars, another civilization had heard humanity's broadcast. They had listened to the message sent during the battle, the declaration of defiance that had been transmitted on every frequency, and they had decided to answer. Yuna reported the signal immediately. Within hours, the news had spread across the Alliance. Another species was out there. Another ally was coming. Elder Howen heard the news in his quarters. He sat alone, looking at a small image of his home world, a planet that had been silenced centuries ago. He had accepted that his species would fade away, the last survivors dying one by one until nothing remained. Now, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he allowed himself to imagine a different ending. Perhaps, he whispered to himself, perhaps we will not die after all. On Earth, celebrations erupted once more. But this time, the joy was different. It was not the relief of survival. It was the excitement of possibility. Humanity was no longer alone. The galaxy was no longer dying. Something new was being born. Captain Dohin stood on a hill overlooking the city where he had grown up. The streets were full of people looking at the sky, pointing at stars that no longer seemed so distant. His communicator buzzed with messages from the Alliance, from the military, from leaders who wanted his guidance. He ignored them all. We actually did it, he said softly. We changed everything. Behind him, Ambassador Sujin approached. She had come to deliver news in person, as she always did with matters of importance. The signal has been confirmed, she said. Multiple ships are approaching from the far galaxy. They will arrive in approximately 6 months. Friends or enemies? They say friends. They say they have been fighting the silence alone for centuries. They say they heard our message and finally found hope. Do-hyun nodded slowly. He thought about the soldiers who had died during the battle. He thought about the families he had visited, the tears he had witnessed, the grief that would never fully heal. Had it been worth it? Would they think so if they could see what their sacrifice had created? He decided they would. Send a response, he said. Tell them we welcome them. Tell them the galaxy is waking up. Tell them that whatever comes next, they will not face it alone. Sujin smiled. Anything else? Do-hyun looked up at the stars, at the infinite darkness that had seemed so empty and cold when he was young. It did not seem empty anymore. It seemed full of possibility. Tell them humanity says hello. The message was sent. The stars received it. And somewhere in the darkness, beings who had never seen Earth or heard human voices felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. The signal to Earth had changed the fate of the entire galaxy. Not because it brought warning of destruction, but because it reminded the universe that courage could exist, that defiance was possible, that even the smallest light could push back the deepest darkness. The silence would wake eventually. The war was not over, but for the first time in billions of years, the universe had a fighting chance. And that was enough. That was everything.